Hello friends, it's Jessica from Three Rivers Homestead, and we have another weekly video for you. And today we are going to talk about ways that I reduce the cost of our homegrown food for our family of 10. You guys know, especially with rising grocery prices, the rising cost of everything nowadays, it can be extremely expensive to keep a family this size well fed. And especially to do it homegrown sometimes, there are infrastructure costs that you have to deal with. And so there are many things that we do to reduce those costs and even bring it down to free in many cases. So that is what I would like to tackle in today's video. I'm going to show you some of the projects that we did this week that are reducing the costs of our homegrown food and even helping us harvest free food this year. So let's go ahead and get started with the first project. So raising chickens or other types of poultry for eggs, a lot of people assume it's free eggs, but technically it isn't because you do have to pay to feed those animals in order for them to produce eggs for you. And one of the ways that we cut down on the cost of our chicken feed is to grow mealworms. It's a great protein source for the chickens. It's very easy to grow, and I'm going to show you in this video how we do that. This is something we did for about 2 or 3 years straight when my older boys were little, and they managed it for me. And now that my younger boys are getting old enough, they're going to take over the task. We just started this current mealworm farm about a month ago, so it's still growing, but eventually it will get to the point where it will provide a significant protein source for our poultry and will help bring down the cost of their feed, giving us cheaper eggs. So what we do is, let me show you here. We have a container, it's full of grain. Let me show you the life cycle of the mealworm first. So this is the pupa stage, the, I guess, cocoon stage of the insect. It looks like that. Out of that, you will hatch the adult mealworm beetle. This is what the beetle looks like. It will lay a bunch of eggs, all in your grain that you have as the bedding in your mealworm farm. And then those eggs will hatch into the larvae, which are the mealworms. And this is what we feed to the chickens. And they will hatch so many that you can harvest a portion of those mealworms, and then the cycle will continue to go. And so we raise them in some kind of plastic container. We've done something as simple as a 3-drawer plastic set that you can pick up at like Walmart. We use free bedding. We use the bran that we sift out of our baked goods when my son is baking with sifted flour, with white flour. And that's what we use as our bedding. And then all you have to do is just give them a carrot or an apple slice or a potato every maybe week and a half or so, and that's how they get their water. And so that you don't have to worry about watering them. They will suck all of the moisture out of that vegetable or fruit. This is an old carrot from the week before, and you can see it's all dried and shriveled up, and that is how they get their water. And then, of course, the food, they eat the grain that is in the container. And so it's really very low maintenance. There's some bran that David had baked with that day, or it was a leftover from his baking. So we poured it into our container, and then the boys are giving some carrots to get them all watered for the coming week. We prefer to sift this outside because the little boys can make quite a mess, and we don't want mealworms all over inside the house. But we do keep the mealworm farm inside the house, and that is to keep outdoor mice and things from getting into the mealworm farm. Once you get your mealworm established, and you establish it by just buying a cup or so of live mealworms from the pet food store and pouring it into whatever container that you're going to use to build up your farm. And once you get it established and have enough mealworms, you can start harvesting some to feed your chickens for free. And this is a great project to teach little ones the life cycle of insects. They love it about as much as the chickens love the food. When you're first starting your mealworm farm, you're just going to want to harvest a few of the worms at a time, just a little bit. And then as it continues to grow bigger and bigger, you can harvest larger amounts to the point where this can cut down a significant portion of your chicken feed. This is also something that you can do for pet reptiles. My older son had a pet gecko at one point, and so we raised the mealworms to feed that pet for free. So just lots of benefits to raising these mealworms. As I mentioned, the first time we did a mealworm farm, we contained the worms in a 3 plastic drawer system. So we would keep one drawer that would have the adult beetles in it, one drawer that would have the pupa, and one drawer that would have the worms in it that we would harvest from. But this required weekly sifting to sift through and separate. They say the advantage to doing the sifting and separating is that you will lose less eggs to the adult beetles who tend to eat some of the eggs that are in the grain that they're, laying the eggs in. But we haven't found that to be a significant factor in the amount of mealworms that we get. And when we, kind of evaluate the amount of time it takes to sift and sort the various stages of development versus the output of mealworms that we get, we have found that it's just easier to keep all of the stages of development in one big container. And then once a week, because I have children who enjoy this chore, they pull it out and they pick out the mealworms that they would like to feed the poultry, and that is what works for us. So if you free range your birds, this might be an unnecessary chore. Your birds would be out pecking around in the grass, getting all of the insects that they need. Unfortunately, we can't free range our birds here due to predator loss, and I don't like the bird excrement being where my children play, so they're in a run and they get their protein source from the mealworms. All right, speaking of other insects, let's look at our honeybees and how we are going to get free honey this year, Lord willing, from some bees. This is our swarm trap, and I will link our specific swarm trap in the video description. And we got it off of Amazon. A local nuke of bees, which would be what you would purchase to start a new beehive, costs more than this trap. So all you need to do is trap one swarm of bees with it, and the swarm trap will pay for itself. But we just fill the inside of the swarm trap with some drawn comb from previous year's beehives. And the bees will be attracted to that. And when they're out swarming in the spring, they will come and, Lord willing, they will find our swarm box here. But like I said, buying bees from a local beekeeper to start a new hive can be quite expensive. And this is a way that we can catch them for free. This is our second year using this swarm trap. Last year we caught a swarm, so already this trap has paid for itself. So, at this point, any bees that we get this year will be free and would produce free honey for us, which is extremely important. We go through a lot of honey as a large family who tries to, reduce our refined sugar intake. What we need to do to our swarm trap is bait it. This is lemongrass oil, and honeybees, lemongrass oil kind of mimics the pheromones that the worker bees give off. So if you bait your swarm trap with some of this lemongrass oil, it will attract the swarms. So we just coat a Q-tip with that lemongrass oil, and we make sure to very thoroughly coat the entrance to the swarm trap. And then after we're done wiping the inside and kind of outside of that entrance, we toss that Q-tip into the bottom of the swarm trap. Now, every week or so we'll go out, and if we don't smell that lemongrass scent, we are going to rebait this trap, and then I will keep you updated on any free bees that we trap this year. So this is a great idea, a way to get some free honey. You guys know that raised bed gardening can also be very expensive, especially if you are bringing in soil. We have very hard clay soil here on our land, so we have to create whatever soil we are going to fill our raised beds with. So we are doing that this year by Adam is deconstructing one of our old chicken runs, and we are going to be right here. They are pulling out some of the old chicken coops. This is our grow out coop that was in that run. And after they pull everything out of it, I am digging up all of the soil. We have like 4 or 5 inches thick of just composted chicken manure and food scraps and just the most beautiful dirt from that old chicken run that was about 7 years worth of, chickens living in there. That combined with our compost that we make from cleaning out our cow shelter and things like that in a compost pile. We're going to combine our homemade compost and then that free soil from the chicken run, and that is how we're going to fill our garden beds this year for free, because it would be extremely expensive. We did it last year. We brought in soil to fill last year's garden beds, and it was just, I cannot justify that cost again this year. So that is how we're going to grow free vegetables. Speaking of garden beds, this is what we were working on this week. I got most of my spring garden already in the existing beds that were there from last year, but now I need to build the beds for our summer garden. As you know, last year we only transferred half of our garden to raised beds and the other half we still planted in ground. But this year we decided to convert the rest of the garden that was in ground last year to raised beds. And I purchased these metal raised beds off of Amazon. I will link them in the description. The reason why I went with these particular raised beds last year was because in 2022, lumber prices were just ridiculous. And when I calculated what it would have cost me to bring in lumber and build the beds, this was a much cheaper alternative for me. I buy these beds throughout the year whenever they're on sale, and I just pick up a couple at the sale price, and that's a way that I can affordably build some raised beds. I also lack the construction skills. Even if we were to find affordable lumber, I would need Adam to construct all of those beds for me, and I don't want to burden him with that project when he has so many other things he needs to do in the spring. And these metal beds, it's very easy for me and the children to build these ourselves while Adam is off at work. So those are the reasons that I chose these metal beds. They worked great for me last year. I know a big concern that a lot of people have is, do they get too hot? Will they burn the children if they're in the garden? Are they too hot for the plants? And that was not a concern at all. We didn't have any issues with the metal beds getting the soil too hot. If anything, I think it might have been a benefit. The only downside to the raised beds was that, yes, raised beds do need to be watered more often. I did find that to be an issue. I was hoping to install an irrigation system this year, but I do not want to invest any more money into the garden, so we are just going to water the old-fashioned way as needed. So as you can see, I lay down my landscape fabric first and I build the beds on top of it. Some people have concerns. They say that you won't get earthworms and things in your soil if you do that, and for some miraculous reason, the earthworms will find their way. I promise you that. Our garden beds last year that we built on top of the landscape fabric are full of earthworms this year. So somehow they find their way to your garden beds. And so we put the landscape fabric down to prevent weed growth up under the beds and also to help with the voles. So besides the benefit of not having to deal with our hard clay soil anymore, and to help with weeding and to have clearer rows for the children to work in the garden, the other huge benefit of these raised beds is that I no longer have to battle these voles that were destroying my garden in 2021. I lost all of my bean and pea crops to the voles in those years. So what I did last year is the raised beds that I built, I put a 1/4 inch hardware cloth in the bottom of them so that no critters could get underneath and tunnel up in, and it worked fabulously last year. So that's what we will do again this year with these beds. And so I know that metal raised beds on landscape fabric isn't the most beautiful way to garden, but there's a certain beauty in it for me in its functionality, in its convenience, in its ability to allow me to have my children out here to run around freely in the garden and not worry about them trampling on precious plants and seedlings and things, because they can very clearly recognize that there are rows that they can walk in and beds where things are planted in. So as the big kids were building me beds on this day, the little ones needed a job, and so I have them busy filling up the watering can and watering some of the seeds that we've gotten planted. This was just such a gorgeous week here in Northwest Ohio. Sunny, unseasonably warm, all the way up until into the 80s. But we had zero rain in the entire week, and I have planted a lot of seeds and little seedlings and things, so we've been having to water. Thankfully, it rained a lot in previous weeks, so the rain barrels were full for the little boys to be able to water the plants from that full rain barrel. As I mentioned, watering is the one downside to this type of raised bed gardening that I do notice. But you just turn that con into a pro by turning your watering time into something that you enjoy. Last year, I got into a pattern of every morning after Adam left for work, I would head outside while most of the children were still sleeping. I would sip my hot cup of tea while I watered my garden and watch the sunrise, and it was just a beautiful time of worship, time to just enjoy the beauty of nature and listen to the birds. And that was wonderful. I actually really enjoyed it. And then as the children would wake, they would come out and find me in the garden, and we really liked that. If we had unlimited funds, I might install some kind of drip irrigation system, but then I would lose that time in the morning that I really do enjoy throughout the warm weather months. So it's all, you just have to weigh, what works for your family, but we really enjoy this. So all these kids worked together this week, and it took in no time at all. We got the majority of the garden beds finished and put together, and this is what the garden looks like right now. We still have a lot more work to do, but you can see they built several beds in the middle. Some of the areas are still empty. If you look over here, this is where we're going to be dumping the soil over the fence to fill the bed, so I haven't completed that. There's an area back there that we're going to fill with more metal beds. But I need to do this in stages. So right here, we will dump all of that chicken run dirt and manure over the fence. Adam's going to need to use the tractor to do that. And then I can haul and fill the beds. And then once we're done doing that, I'll cover that area in landscape fabric and put a few more beds over there. But these empty beds will be what we plant the summer garden in. Right now, the little boys are running around. We have some beautiful perennial herbs and things that are coming up in the garden already. They are enjoying sampling things like the lemon balm and the garlic chives. We have some perennial oregano that came back up. So they're already running around and snacking. Otherwise, I noticed that this hot weather, some of my winter sown items, the tops of the jugs need to be taken off or they're going to fry. I also decided to go ahead and transplant some of the lettuce seedlings. They're still very little and fragile, but I figured we would go ahead and get them into some of these prepared beds and go ahead and get a head start on some of our lettuce. Our spring garden is pretty much planted. I did a couple successions of peas, and we will do more peas. We've done half of our potatoes. We got some new strawberry plants, rhubarb, asparagus beds going. We've got spinach, radishes, carrots, and then this lettuce. And I believe that, and our onions, we got onions in too. And then the rest of the beds that we've built will be for summer crops. It'll be our peppers, our tomatoes, cucumbers, squash, beans, several other things that I'm probably forgetting. The only other spring crops I do need to get in the ground are our brassicas. Those are in the winter sown jugs. And then we have lots of herbs and flowers that will go in the towers and green stalk and things that are along the fence. But the garden is coming along. This is one way that we feed our large family for cheap, and it's such a blessing. We really enjoy the process of gardening as well as enjoying the free-ish. It's not free when you grow a garden, but it is cheaper than it would be purchasing it in the store, especially if you were looking for organic and locally grown produce. Let's talk about some of the other ways that we feed our family cheaply or for free. This time of year, the dandelions are coming up, and there's also another weed. I guess a weed is all in how you look at it, I guess, but purple dead nettle is available everywhere in the pastures. I have a video all about making purple dead nettle pesto. So don't forget to do foraging and look for all the wild plants around you that grow in abundance that can feed your family and offset some of your grocery costs. Our family also enjoys hunting and fishing and doing things like that. That is one way that we feed our family for free or cheap. So there are just so many ways that you can cut down on food costs for a large family. And like I said, with some of these things, there is an upfront cost in infrastructure, in buying or building garden beds, in fencing for growing your own meat and animals like that, in building coops and structures. But once you get the infrastructure cost down, there are ways that then you can cut down the costs in growing future batches of those animals and things. And then all of the things work together. You let the large animals provide the manure for you that will help feed your garden plants. Some of those garden plants can feed your poultry and other animals, and it's this huge sustainable ecosystem that all works together to provide for the needs of everybody on the homestead. I hope that wherever you are at, you had a beautiful week, just like we had here in Northwest Ohio. We enjoyed not just work, but lots of family time together, just being outside in the sunshine. And that's about it for this week's video. We'll see you guys next week. Until then, be blessed, friends. Bye.